"Are these all your children?" Angry Cowboy asked, then said, "Good. I'll take every one." The sun was sinking behind the jagged mountains when the supply wagon creaked into Redemption Pass, the tired mules snorting clouds of steam into the frigid air. Evening shadows stretched long across the dirt street, swallowing up the wooden storefronts and hitching posts. Most folks were heading inside, lamps flickering on in windows, doors slamming shut against the cold wind coming off the plains. That's when people noticed her. A thin woman, more shadow than flesh, stepped down from the back of the wagon, her feet unsteady, her breath shaky. Her clothes were patched and frayed, the hem stiff with dried mud from miles of walking. Dust streaked her cheeks. Her hair, once well kept, hung in tangled waves around her face. Her name was Martha Holt. She had been traveling for 3 days with hardly any food, no money, and 3 terrified children clinging to her like frightened birds. Samuel, the oldest at 12, jumped down first, his jaw clenched like a man instead of a child. His eyes scanned the street for danger, hands curled into fists as if he could fight the whole world alone. Anna, 8 years old, pressed her face into her mother's dress, shivering even though the cold wasn't the only reason. And Eli, only 5, his little legs trembling beneath him, held a small burlap sack containing the only surviving toy from their old life, a whittled horse his father carved before the world fell apart. The wagon driver didn't even offer to help. He simply grunted, flicked the reins and drove off, leaving the 4 of them standing alone in the middle of a street full of strangers. A murmur rippled through the townspeople. Who are they? Another family of beggars. Look at 'em, half-starved. Lock your doors. Can't be talking in everyone that crawls into town. Martha kept her head down, but she heard every whisper. Her heart twisted. She had prayed, oh how she had prayed, that Redemption Pass might be a place where they could start again, somewhere no one knew her husband's mistakes, somewhere the outlaws who murdered him couldn't track them easily. But all she felt now was the sting of rejection before she even spoke a word. Her knees nearly buckled, the exhaustion of loss and fear crashing down on her. She placed a steadying hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Stay close to me," she whispered. He nodded, though she could feel the tension in his body. The boy had grown up too fast. Across the street, a shopkeeper leaned in his doorway, arms folded. "We ain't got food to waste," he called out. "If you're looking for charity, best keep moving." Martha swallowed hard. She opened her mouth to respond, but fear dried her throat. She wanted to tell them, "We're just trying to survive. My husband is dead. Those who killed him are chasing us. Please, we need help." But the words stayed trapped inside her. Anna started crying softly, and Martha knelt to wipe her cheeks with trembling fingers. "It's all right, sweetheart. Mama's here." She wished she believed her own words. Then a bootstep echoed on the wooden boardwalk behind them. Firm, slow, intentional. Martha stiffened. Samuel stepped in front of her protectively. A deep, stern voice spoke. "Are these all your children?" The tone was sharp, almost angry, the kind of voice that usually meant trouble. Martha turned, dread crawling up her spine. Standing there was a broad-shouldered cowboy, dust on his boots, hat pulled low, coat worn from hard work in harder seasons. His eyes were sharp, intense, like a man who'd seen too much and trusted too little. His name, though she didn't yet know it, was Luke Callahan. The townspeople fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Martha forced herself to speak. "Yes," she said quietly. "These are my children." Her voice was soft, apologetic, like she was expecting punishment for daring to exist. Luke studied the 3 shaking, hungry little ones. His jaw tightened. His nostrils flared slightly. To the watching crowd it looked like anger. But it wasn't. It was something far more dangerous. Righteous indignation. Deep grief. A man's heart breaking at the sight of suffering he knew too well. He took a short breath, eyes lifting to meet hers, and what Martha saw there made her own breath tremble. Not judgment. Not contempt. But a fierceness, and a sorrow, and something like recognition. As if God himself had just tapped this cowboy on the shoulder. Martha didn't know yet that Luke Callahan had once begged God for a family to protect. She didn't know he carried the weight of solitude like a stone in his chest. She only knew the street had gone still. And this man's next words were going to change everything. Silence clung to the dusty street like fog as Martha Holt stood trembling beneath the weight of a stranger's question. Luke Callahan didn't move. Didn't blink. His boots were planted firm on the wooden boardwalk, his hat shadowing his eyes, but nothing could hide the storm building behind them. Martha tightened her grip on Eli's small hand. Samuel edged closer, ready to defend his mother. Anna peeked out from behind Martha's skirt, tears still drying on her cheeks. Luke's gaze swept over the three children, slowly, deeply, as though memorizing every hollowed cheek and frightened expression. The muscles in his jaw ticked. Then he said the words that stopped Martha's heart. "Good. I'll take every one." The townspeople erupted at once. What did he say? He can't be serious. Callahan's finally lost his mind. He's been alone too long, poor fool. A woman from the mercantile shook her head. You don't know where they came from, Luke? Could be trouble following them. Luke's eyes didn't leave Martha. His voice, though quiet, rolled like distant thunder. Trouble already did follow them. Martha's breath hitched. How did he know? Samuel stepped protectively in front of her again, glaring up at the tall cowboy. We don't need nothing from you, he growled, trying so hard to sound like a man instead of a starving child. Luke slowly knelt, his long coat brushing the dusty ground, as he came eye to eye with Samuel. You're a brave boy, he said softly. But bravery doesn't fill your belly. Doesn't keep your mama warm. Doesn't give you a safe bed to sleep in. Samuel swallowed hard, torn between pride and longing. Luke looked at Anna next. Her little face was blotchy from crying, her braids frayed and dirty. She tried to hide again, but he spoke gently. You're safe. Nobody here's gonna hurt you. Then his gaze shifted to Eli, who stood stiff and silent, clutching his wooden horse so tight his knuckles went white. Luke's expression softened even more, so subtly most people wouldn't notice. But Martha did. It made her knees weaken. He rose to his full height and finally addressed her. Ma'am, he said quietly, I'm not letting you walk out of this town without help. Martha opened her mouth but nothing came out. She felt the weight of every mile she'd walked, every night she'd prayed while her children slept cold and hungry. Why, she managed at last. You don't even know us. Luke tipped his hat back slightly, revealing the raw honesty in his eyes. Don't need to know your whole story to know God sent you here, he said. And I'm not about to ignore what he puts in my path. Some townsfolk scoffed. Others stared shocked. Luke ignored them all. He reached out his hand, not demanding, not pitying, just steady, waiting, almost reverent. Samuel stiffened. Anna held her breath. Eli clung to Martha's skirt. Martha stared at that hand like it was a lifeline, or a trap. For months she had trusted no one. Everyone she knew had either died, betrayed her, or run in fear when the outlaws came for her husband. She had learned to shrink, to stay small, to expect nothing. But this man. He didn't look at her like a burden. He didn't look at her children with irritation. And he didn't look at her fear with judgment. Instead, his voice softened. You need a place to rest, he said. A warm meal. Water. Quiet. Safety. Martha felt her eyes sting. She blinked hard. I can't pay, she whispered. Luke shook his head. Wasn't a skin, for payment. I'm a skin you to let me do what's right. Martha wavered. Her heart pounded. Samuel tugged her sleeve. Mama. I'm hungry, he whispered, shame coloring his voice. That broke her. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her trembling hand in Luke's. The warmth of his calloused palm stunned her. It was the first kind human touch she had felt in months. Luke squeezed gently, steadying her, then nodded once, decisively. Come on, he said. You're all coming home with me. The entire street went silent. A cowboy from the saloon spat into the dirt. Callahan, you ain't thinking straight. Luke shot him a sharp look. I'm thinking clearer than I ever have. He turned back to the family. Samuel lifted Anna into his arms. Luke picked up Eli effortlessly, the little boy curling instinctively against his chest. Martha stared in wonder, her heart aching at the tenderness on the face of a man who looked like he hadn't smiled in years. As they walked toward the ranch trail outside town, a gust of wind swept down the street, carrying dust, cold, and whispered disapproval. But over it all, Martha heard something else, something small and still. A whisper in her spirit. I am with you. I go before you. I will not abandon you. She looked over at Luke, Eli resting against his shoulder, and felt something she didn't expect. Hope. Flickering. Fragile. But alive. And that was how the journey truly began. With one question. For trembling souls. And a cowboy bold enough to claim a family he didn't even know. Yet somehow believed God had chosen for him. The trail leading to Callahan Ridge wound through open plains, brittle grass brushing against horse hooves as the sun dipped low and the sky blazed orange. Luke walked ahead, carrying Eli against his shoulder while Martha and her older children followed close behind. Martha's legs trembled from exhaustion, but she kept moving, because for the first time in months the children weren't cold, or scared, or alone. Luke walked at a steady pace, occasionally glancing over his shoulder to check on them. Martha noticed he always did it silently, almost shyly, as though he didn't want them to feel watched, only protected. When they reached the ridge, Samuel let out a small gasp. Luke's ranch wasn't grand, but it was sturdy, fenced fields, a weathered barn, and a modest cabin with smoke curling from the chimney. Warmth. Safety. The future. Anna squeezed Martha's hand. Mama, it looks like heaven. Martha didn't trust her voice enough to respond. Luke stepped onto the porch and gently lowered Eli, who clung to his neck a moment longer before letting go reluctantly. You hungry, son? Luke asked softly. Eli nodded, lip trembling. Luke gave a faint smile that surprised even him. Inside, the cabin lit up with warm lamplight. The air smelled of wood smoke and cedar. Luke moved around the small kitchen with quiet purpose, pulling out bread, dried apples, and leftover stew. Sit wherever you'd like, he said, glancing at Martha only long enough to show respect before busying himself with bowls. Samuel hesitated, not used to being offered anything without suspicion. Anna slid into a chair quickly, her eyes wide with awe. Martha stayed near the door, afraid to relax. Afraid to cause trouble. Afraid this kindness would vanish if she breathed too loudly. Luke noticed. You ain't intrudin', he said gently. This house is open to you. All of you. She nodded stiffly but didn't move. He didn't push. When the children finally had warm food in front of them, they ate with trembling hands. Eli devoured his stew so fast Luke had to stop him gently. Easy, little man. Ain't nobody taking it from you. That simple reassurance shattered something inside Martha. She turned her face away, tears burning her eyes. After the meal, Luke set more wood on the fire, the glow filling the room with comfort. The children curled up near the hearth, full-bellied and drowsy for the first time in weeks. Samuel fought sleep the hardest, trying to keep his eyes open. You can rest, Luke told him. I'll keep watch. Samuel studied him, still uncertain. Why? He whispered. A long silence passed before Luke answered. Because someone should have watched over me when I was your age, he said. And I won't fail you the way folks failed me. Samuel absorbed that carefully, then nodded and let himself drift off. Luke waited until all three children had succumbed to exhaustion before finally facing Martha. She stood near the window, arms wrapped around herself, shadows stretching across her face. You don't owe me details, Luke began softly. But I need to know if somebody's chasing you. Martha's breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around the windowsill until her knuckles whitened. Luke stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. I ain't asking because I regret taking you in, he said. I'm askin' because I need to know what I'm protecting your children from. His voice was firm now. Not harsh, never harsh, but charged with a quiet, righteous fire. Martha's shoulders slumped. She trembled once, then nodded. He was a good man, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My husband. He didn't deserve what happened. Luke listened without interrupting. But, he crossed paths with the wrong people. Men who take and kill and destroy. Men with no fear of God or law. Her voice cracked as she forced the words out. He owed them money, more than we could ever repay. When he tried to walk away, they set our home on fire. They shot him right in front of the children. Luke's jaw tightened so hard a muscle flickered at the edge. He closed his eyes briefly, a prayer silently passing through him. They left him to burn, Martha whispered. And they said they'd come for us next. Because they don't like loose ends. Luke opened his eyes, calm, steady but burning with controlled anger. They know you're alive? He asked. Martha nodded weakly. We've been running ever since. Every town we reached, people turned us away. Nobody wanted trouble. Luke stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen to me now. Martha's heart hammered. She met his eyes. You're not alone anymore, he said. His voice wasn't loud, just sure, solid, unshakable. I ain't tinning you out. And I ain't afraid of these men. You don't understand, she whispered. They're killers. I don't care what they are. His voice dropped to a low, fierce rumble. Nobody threatens a woman and her children while they're under my roof. A tear slipped down Martha's cheek. Luke noticed, but pretended not to, giving her dignity. She wiped her eyes and whispered, Why? Why risk yourself for people you've just met? Luke looked toward the sleeping children, his expression softening. Because God didn't make families only from blood, he murmured. Sometimes he builds them by crossing the right paths at the right time. He drew a deep breath. And I reckon God put you and these little ones right in my path for a reason. Martha's breath trembled. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to cry. Luke stood still, letting her finally release the weight she'd carried alone. And though neither of them knew it yet, the danger she feared was already closer than either imagined. Riding hard across the plains, following tracks toward Callahan Ridge, bringing the darkness that would test Luke Callahan's promise to its limit. Morning came slowly to Callahan Ridge. The first light spilled across the plains, warming the frost-covered grass and brushing soft gold over the ranch house. Inside, the Holt children woke to something they had nearly forgotten. The feeling of safety. Eli was the first to stir. He blinked sleepily, clutching his wooden horse, then looked around the unfamiliar cabin with wide eyes. He didn't cry. For the first time in months he didn't wake screaming. Anna sat up next, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, it's warm." Her voice held awe, not fear. Martha reached out to smooth her daughter's tangled hair. "Yes, sweetheart. It is." Samuel lay still, pretending to sleep. He didn't trust comfort, not yet. Comfort had been snatched away too many times. But he listened to the gentle crackle of the fire, the soft breath of his siblings, and the quiet sounds from the kitchen. Luke was already awake. He moved carefully, quietly, boots off so he wouldn't wake the children, measuring coffee grounds and slicing bread with the precision of a man who lived alone but cared about doing things right. Martha watched him from across the room, her hands folded in her lap. She had expected arrogance or pity. But Luke moved with humility. He didn't act like a rescuer, he acted like a host welcoming guests he valued. When he noticed her awake, he paused. "Mornin', ma'am," he said softly. "Hope you slept better than last night." She swallowed. I did. Thank you." He nodded once, satisfied, then slid a mug of hot tea toward her. "It's not fancy, but it's warm." Martha stared at it as though it might vanish. No one had handed her something with kindness in so long that the simple act unraveled a knot inside her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli padded over to Luke a moment later, dragging his blanket behind him. Luke crouched down to meet him at eye level. "You hungry, little man?" Eli nodded, thumb drifting toward his mouth. Luke gently lowered the boy's hand. "You'll get a plate. No need to worry." Martha's breath caught. Luke wasn't just feeding them, he was restoring something deeper than hunger. The children began to heal. Breakfast was simple, bread, jam and eggs from Luke's hens, but the Holt children ate slowly this time, as though relearning the experience of trusting food to stay on the table. Samuel kept watching Luke, studying him like a puzzle. Anna hummed quietly as she ate, her feet swinging beneath the chair. Eli sat beside Luke, leaning against his arm with innocent confidence. Luke didn't move away. Afterward, Luke led the children outside. "I got chores need doing," he said. "But there's plenty you can help with if you'd like. Work makes a body feel strong." Samuel perked up immediately. The boy had been carrying responsibility far beyond his years. Luke could see it in the way he squared his shoulders. "I can help," Samuel said quickly. "I figured," Luke replied with a small smile. "You want to learn how to saddle a horse?" Samuel's eyes widened. "Yes, sir." Luke's smile grew. "Then come on." Anna helped Martha hang laundry on the rope line. The mountain breeze tugged at the sheets, making them dance like ghosts against the blue sky. "Mama," Anna said, twirling under the linens, "do you think we can stay here? Forever?" Martha's throat tightened. "Sweetheart, I don't know." But in her heart, she wished the answer was yes. Nathan and Eli went with Luke to the barn. Luke lifted Eli to let him pet the ranch's old mule. The little boy giggled, an honest, belly-deep sound Martha hadn't heard since before the fire. Luke looked up toward Martha then, catching her watching from the doorway. He didn't smile wide. Luke was not a man of showy expressions, but his eyes softened enough that she felt warmth spread into her chest. Luke's faith becomes evident. That evening, as the sky turned violet and the stars blinked awake, Luke read from a worn Bible by lamplight. He didn't preach. He simply read aloud, the cadence of scripture filling the small cabin. "For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways." Eli fell asleep against Luke's side again. Anna curled by the fire with her head on Martha's lap. Samuel sat straight-backed, listening as if trying to memorize every word. Martha watched the scene unfolding before her. Her children safe, warm, cared for, and silent tears filled her eyes. She whispered a prayer that was half gratitude, half disbelief. "Lord, why are you blessing us now? After everything?" Luke closed the Bible softly, sensing her thoughts. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "God waits till we're empty enough to receive what he's been trying to give." Martha swallowed hard. She had no answer, only emotion. But darkness is closer than they know. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Luke stepped outside to check the horses and scan the ridgeline. The moon was bright, too bright. A faint imprint in the dirt caught his eye. He knelt, running his fingers over it. A hoof print. Fresh. Not one of his horses. His jaw tightened. The warmth of the day's healing vanished beneath the cold certainty tightening in his gut. Somebody else had been near his property. Watching. Tracking. He rose slowly, his silhouette a dark shape against the moonlit barn. Inside the house, Martha slept peacefully for the first time in months. Outside, Luke made a vow, quiet but fierce. If they come, they'll have to go through me. The shadows on the ridge did not move. But they were there. Waiting. And the family God had placed under his roof. Luke would die before surrendering them to the darkness that hunted them. A cold wind swept down from the northern peaks that night, rattling the shutters and whispering through the dry grass. The animals in the barn were restless. The horses stamped and snorted, uneasy. Luke Callahan felt it before he saw anything, the way the air changes when trouble's coming. He sat at the kitchen table, oil lamp flickering low, cleaning his rifle in silence. The rest of the house slept soundly, unaware of the storm approaching. Then came the sound. Faint, distant, hoofbeats. At first only one, then several, rhythmic and deliberate, carrying across the valley like thunder rolling over the earth. Luke's eyes lifted. His hands went still. He knew that rhythm. It wasn't travelers passing through. It was men on a hunt. The warning. He rose from the table, every movement controlled, silent. He walked to the window and peered into the dark. Far off, flashes of movement, 3, maybe 4 riders, shapes barely visible under the pale moonlight. Luke's heart thudded once, heavy and sure. They found her. He turned quickly, moving through the cabin with the focus of a man who'd lived through ambushes before. He reached for Martha's room and tapped the door lightly. "Martha," he whispered. "Get up." Inside, Martha stirred, startled. "Luke? What's wrong?" "Riders. Headed this way. You and the children, cellar now." She froze for a second, the word riders stabbing her like a knife. But one look at his face told her everything. She grabbed Eli and Anna, shaking Samuel awake. "Quickly, just like I showed you." The children, though terrified, obeyed. Samuel took Eli's hand, Anna clung to her mother. Luke helped them down into the small trapdoor cellar beneath the floorboards, a cramped, hidden space meant for storing preserves and grain. It wasn't much, but it would hold them safe if he could keep the attackers outside. Martha gripped his arm as he helped her down last. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Luke, they'll kill you." He looked at her steadily, his voice calm but firm. "They'll try. But they'll fail." "Please," she whispered. "Come with us. Hide too." He shook his head. "God didn't put me here to hide, Martha. He put me here to stand." Their eyes locked for a heartbeat that felt eternal. Then he lowered the cellar door and covered it with a rug just as the sound of horses grew near. The arrival. Outside, thunder cracked. No, not thunder. Gunfire. A shot fired into the air. "Callahan," a voice bellowed, rough and mocking. "We know you're out here." Luke stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, the wind whipping his coat. The lamplight behind him cast a long shadow across the yard. 3 riders circled the front of the property, torches burning in their hands. Their faces were mean and scarred, their laughter sharp as broken glass. At their center rode Vern Steele, a man Luke knew by reputation alone. Leader of the Blackthorn gang. Ruthless. Merciless. The same men who'd slaughtered Martha's husband and burned their home. Vern reined in his horse, smirking. Well, you got yourself some company, Callahan. Where's the pretty widow and those brats she's dragging around?" Luke's jaw flexed. "Don't see how that's your concern." "Oh, I think it is. They belong to me." "You don't own people," Luke said flatly. Vern chuckled, glancing at his men. "Ain't that noble? You always were the stubborn kind, Callahan. Folks say you used to be a lawman." "I was," Luke said evenly. "Still am in my heart." "Well, heart don't mean much out here," Vern sneered. "Not when a bullet can stop it." Luke stepped off the porch and leveled his rifle. "Then I reckon you better aim straight." The standoff. The torches hissed in the cold night air. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. It spattered against Luke's hat, ran down the rifle barrel. Vern laughed low. "You'd really die for some widow and her whelps? Ain't even your kin." Luke's eyes never wavered. "They are now." He said it simply, no hesitation, no fear. Just truth. For a moment even the outlaws hesitated. There was something in the cowboy's tone, a quiet authority that didn't come from bravado but conviction. Then Vern snarled. "Fine. Die with them." He raised his gun. The world exploded. Gunfire tore through the storm, echoing across the valley. Sparks flew off the porch post as bullets splintered wood. Luke dove behind a wagon, returned fire, and dropped one rider clean off his horse. Inside the cellar, Anna whimpered. Martha pressed her hand over the girl's mouth, whispering prayers through her tears. "Lord Jesus, shield him, please shield him." Eli clung to Samuel, his little wooden horse pressed to his chest. Samuel's voice was trembling but fierce. "He won't let them win." Faith under fire. Luke's breathing came hard now, his shoulder bleeding where a bullet had grazed him. But his aim stayed steady. He whispered under his breath. "Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." He swung his rifle and fired again, driving the attackers back toward the fence line. Vern cursed. "He's just one man." But fear was creeping into his voice. Luke was a marksman, disciplined, unshaken. When his rifle clicked empty, Luke dropped it, drew his revolver and stepped out from cover. Lightning flashed, illuminating him standing alone, soaked and bloodied, his weapon raised steady. "Go on then," Luke said. "Come get what you came for." Vern's remaining men hesitated. The storm broke fully, rain pelting down. Wind screamed across the ridge. Vern spat, realizing the fight was lost. He yanked his horse around. "This ain't over, Callahan." Luke fired once more, grazing his arm, a warning shot. "Yes, it is." The outlaws fled into the darkness, their curses carried away by thunder. Aftermath. For a moment, only rain and the sound of Luke's labored breathing filled the night. He lowered his revolver, the weight of adrenaline leaving him trembling. Then he turned toward the house and limped inside. He pulled back the rug and lifted the cellar door. Martha's tear-streaked face appeared first, then the children's frightened eyes. Is it over?" she whispered. Luke nodded, exhaustion heavy in his voice. "It's over." Samuel climbed up first and froze when he saw the blood on Luke's sleeve. "You're hurt." Luke chuckled weakly. "Nothing serious. Just a scratch." Martha reached for him instinctively, her hands gentle on his arm. "You could have been killed." He met her gaze, rain dripping from his hat brim. "Wasn't my night to die." Her breath caught. For a moment she couldn't speak. She just stared at him, the man who had stood between her family and death itself. Eli slipped past and hugged Luke's leg, small arms clutching tight. Luke looked down, stunned. The little boy whispered against his coat, "Thank you, Pa." Luke froze. Martha gasped softly, but Luke didn't correct the boy. He just lowered a shaking hand to Eli's head and whispered, "You're welcome, son." Outside the rain began to fade. Inside, peace, fragile, beautiful peace, settled over the Callahan cabin. But Luke knew peace wouldn't last. Men like Vern Steele didn't forgive defeat. They came back meaner. Still, as he looked at the widow and her 3 children gathered close around the fire, Luke made another silent vow. No matter what's coming, they will never face it alone. Dawn broke slow and pale across the valley, brushing the sky with streaks of gold. The storm had passed. But its memory lay everywhere, mud thick on the porch, hoofprints carved deep into the soil, and splintered wood from bullets scattered near the rail. Inside the cabin everything was still. Luke Callahan sat in his worn chair by the fire, eyes half closed, exhaustion dragging at him like a weight. His coat lay discarded on the floor, soaked and torn where the bullet had grazed his shoulder. His shirt sleeve was rolled up, revealing the red, angry streak where the skin had broken. Martha knelt beside him with a basin of warm water and a cloth. Her hands, though trembling from the night before, moved with gentle skill. "You should have told me how bad it was," she murmured. Luke opened one eye. "I told you, it's barely a scratch." She gave him a look that could rival a sermon. "Luke Callahan, I've raised 3 children on my own and tended a dying husband for months. I know a barely scratch from a real wound. And this?" She pressed the cloth lightly against the gash. Luke hissed softly. "This is real." He let out a breath, half a laugh, half pain. "I suppose it is." The children watched. Samuel, Anna, and little Eli sat in a tight row on the floor, wrapped in blankets, watching Martha clean and bandage Luke's arm like he was some wounded war hero. Eli clutched his wooden horse and stared at Luke with round, admiring eyes. Samuel was the one who finally spoke. "You killed one of them men." Luke's head lifted, surprised by the boy's steady tone. "I did." "Did you have to?" His voice was quiet, not accusing but searching. Luke nodded slowly. Yes. If I hadn't, he would have come inside. Would have hurt your ma. Hurt all of you. Samuel swallowed. Pa always said you don't take a life unless you're protecting one. Luke looked at him with a sadness that held years. Your father was a wise man. Samuel held his gaze for a moment, then nodded firmly. Thank you for protecting ours. Luke blinked, the simple words hitting him harder than any outlaw's bullet. Martha's fear. And her faith. When the children finally drifted outside to feed the chickens, Martha continued tending Luke's shoulder. Her hands were steadier now, but her breath still trembled. She spoke without looking at him. Oh, I was afraid. He watched her. Anyone would be. No, she shook her head. Not afraid of the outlaws. Afraid of what losing you would have done to the children. She paused, swallowed. To me. His chest tightened. Martha. She set the cloth aside and finally met his eyes. Last night when you shut the cellar door, I thought, Lord, you sent us a protector, don't take him from us already. Luke looked away, jaw working. I'm no hero. I've made more mistakes than I care to count. Maybe so, she said softly. But God doesn't need perfect men. Just willing ones. Her words sank deep, settling into places inside him he'd long kept buried. Luke's past surfaces. He leaned back in the chair, eyes distant. Martha, you should know something about me. She sat up straighter. What is it? I wasn't always a rancher. He took a breath. I was a marshal. A good one. Until a family got caught in the crossfire of a gunfight I should have prevented. His voice cracked. Couldn't save them. Couldn't forgive myself. Martha's expression softened with understanding. Is that why you were alone? He nodded. I figured God was done with me. And maybe I deserved it. She hesitated, then reached out and touched his uninjured arm. Look. Last night God wasn't done with you. Not at all. He used you to save us. He swallowed hard. Maybe he used you to save me. Their eyes held, warm, lingering, too long for a man and a widow who barely knew how to breathe yet without fear. Martha looked away first, cheeks warming. You need rest. He smiled faintly. So do you. A home beginning to heal. The morning passed quietly. Anna helped Martha sweep up the broken wood from the porch. Samuel patched bullet holes in the barn. Eli followed Luke everywhere, refusing to let go of his hand. Luke didn't mind. Every time the little boy reached up for him, something inside Luke softened, something he had thought long dead. By noon, the cabin smelled of warm bread, and Martha set a loaf on the table. Luke sat down, weary but peaceful. Eli crawled up into his lap without hesitation. Luke blinked, startled. Martha froze mid-step, watching. Eli rested his head against Luke's chest and whispered, Are you gonna stay with us? Luke swallowed the lump in his throat. For now, he said gently, I'm right where God wants me. Eli smiled as if that answer was enough. But Martha saw the storm behind Luke's eyes. For now. Because both of them knew Vern Steele wasn't finished. And Luke couldn't stay forever. Unless something changed. A message at dusk. As dusk settled, a rider approached the ranch, Sheriff Briggs. An old friend of Luke's. A man with a grave face and a grave message. He dismounted, tipping his hat. Look. We need to talk. Luke stiffened. It's about Steele. Briggs nodded. He's gathered more men. Mean ones. They're coming back. And Luke? He lowered his voice. They're not just after the widow. They're after you. Martha, standing in the doorway with a dish towel in her hands, felt her blood turn to ice. Luke's expression went hard, calm, resolved. I figured as much. Briggs glanced at the children behind her. This ain't safe for them. You need a plan. We have one, Luke said quietly, glancing at Martha. Which is? The sheriff asked. Luke tightened his jaw. Keep them alive. Briggs exhaled. Then you'd better prepare. Because Steele ain't making idle threats. He means to end you. The sheriff rode away. Martha stepped out onto the porch and faced Luke, voice trembling. Luke, what are you going to do? He met her eyes, steady, fierce, unwavering. Stand between you and hell itself. Martha's breath caught. Because she believed him. Because he could. Because she finally understood. God hadn't just sent a protector. He'd sent family. The next 2 days felt like the slow tightening of a noose around the Callahan ranch. Word traveled through the valley that Vern Steele was gathering men, desperate, hard-eyed drifters who followed the scent of blood and money. Luke Callahan moved with purpose across the property, preparing for war. But this time he wasn't preparing alone. The ranch fortified. Luke spent the morning reinforcing the barn door, stacking sandbags in hidden spots around the chicken coop, and placing rifles in reachable positions. Samuel trailed behind him, watching intently. "Why here?" Samuel asked, pointing to the corner where Luke set a rifle. "Because it gives a clear line of sight," Luke replied. "And it's close to cover. Cover is your best friend in a gunfight." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Am I gonna have to fight?" Luke straightened and faced him. "No. You're gonna protect your brother and sister. That's your job." He put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "And Samuel, that matters more than any rifle ever could." Samuel swallowed, pride and fear mingling. "Yes, sir." Luke gave a rare smile. "Good man." Martha's courage awakens. Inside the house, Martha tied her hair back and moved with fierce determination. She wasn't a woman who waited helplessly while danger crept near, not anymore. She prepared jars of herbs for wounds, boiled water, cleaned rags, and checked the cellar twice. Yet her hands kept trembling. "Lord, strengthen me. I won't lose these children. Not after everything." She looked out the window where Luke and Samuel were setting barricades, and she felt something shift inside her. A fierceness. A bravery she didn't know she still had. She grabbed Luke's coat from the peg and stepped outside. "You need this," she said, holding it out. Luke turned, surprised. "Weather's warm." "Still," she insisted quietly. "It's yours." He took it, their hands brushing. Just a moment, but enough to make her breath catch. And then she said something she hadn't planned. Something that surged up from her heart before fear could silence it. "I prayed last night. And I asked God why he'd send you to us when it would only put you in danger." Luke's brows drew together, listening. "And do you know what I felt him say?" she whispered. "That you're not here because of danger. You're here because you're part of his plan. For us. For the children. Maybe even for yourself." Luke swallowed hard, his throat thick. "Martha. I don't know what I am anymore." "You're a good man," she said simply. "And God's not done with you." He looked away, shaken by how much her faith in him mattered. Danger rides closer. By late afternoon, Sheriff Briggs returned, not with calm news, but with urgency cutting through his voice. "Look. Steele's men were spotted 5 miles north, crossing Agnew Pass." Luke stiffened. "How many?" 6, maybe 7. Armed. And angry. Martha felt her knees weaken. Eli grabbed her skirt, sensing her fear. Briggs continued, "They're riding hard. You've got hours. Maybe less." Luke straightened, jaw like stone. "Then it's time." "Time for what?" Martha whispered. Luke turned to her with fierce gentleness. "To get you and the children somewhere safe." The refusal. The sheriff nodded toward his wagon. "Town's got armed men. We can hold Steele off there." But Martha shook her head immediately. "No." Her voice was soft but firm. "We run and they'll hunt us again. We hide and they'll tear through anyone who tries to protect us." Luke said quietly, "She's right. Steele wants them. He won't stop until he gets what he thinks belongs to him." Briggs cursed under his breath. Martha stepped forward. "Luke, we stay. Together. God didn't bring us here to run." Luke stared at her, at the quiet courage blazing in her eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. Maybe she was right. Maybe this time he wasn't meant to face danger alone. He took her hand. "Martha, if you stay behind cover. You listen to me. No heroics." She lifted her chin. "I'm a mother, Luke. Protecting my children is all the heroics I'll ever need." Luke couldn't argue with that. The quiet before darkness. As sunset bled across the sky in shades of deep red, the ranch felt strangely peaceful. Luke saddled his fastest horse and rode to the ridge overlooking the valley. He needed to see with his own eyes how close danger was. The wind whipped at his coat. The grass bent in long waves. Then he saw them. Dark shapes on the horizon. Riders. Moving slow, steady, deliberate. Steele's gang. Luke's pulse hardened. Time was running out. A prayer in the night. That night, after securing the property, Luke stepped into the barn to check the horses. He found Martha already there, hands clasped, head bowed. She looked up, startled. "I'm sorry. I come here to pray sometimes. It's quiet." Luke stepped closer. "You don't have to pray alone." Martha hesitated, then nodded. They knelt side by side on the hay-covered floor. Martha's voice was trembling but full of conviction as she prayed. "Lord, we need you. We need your hand over this ranch, over these children, over Luke. Evil is coming, but you are stronger. Please, stand between us and what seeks to destroy us. Give Luke the strength he needs. And give me courage to trust you." Luke swallowed hard, then bowed his head. God. I've walked away more times than I can count. But I'm standing here now. If you've got a use for a man like me, I'm yours. Martha opened her eyes, tears glistening. Luke met her gaze. For a moment, nothing existed in the world but the two of them and the weight of everything unsaid. Then Samuel's voice called from the cabin, breaking the moment. Ma? Oh. The lantern blew out. Martha wiped her eyes, stood and rushed toward the house. Luke remained for a moment longer, staring into the dim barn light. Tomorrow, the fight would come. And one way or another, everything would change. He walked back toward the cabin, revolver at his side, heart steady with a faith he hadn't felt in years. The final storm was almost here. The morning came with a stillness so unnatural it felt like the land itself was holding its breath. The sky was pale gray. No birds sang. Even the wind had gone quiet. Luke Callahan stood on the porch of the ranch, rifle in hand, revolver at his hip, boots planted firmly in the dirt. He wore his old marshal's badge pinned under his coat, out of sight but close to his heart. Inside, Martha gathered the children near the cellar door, her voice soft but steady. Remember what I told you. Stay close. Stay quiet. And whatever you hear, you pray. Eli clung to her skirt. Samuel held Anna's hand tightly. A knock sounded on the doorframe. Martha spun around, but it was only Luke, stepping inside for one last moment. They're close, he said quietly. Samuel gasped. Anna began to tremble. Martha's throat tightened. Luke? He looked at her with something deep, something that went beyond fear or duty. If anything happens, you run. Sheriff Briggs is a mile out with men. He'll meet you. She stepped forward, shaking her head. No. I'm staying with my children. And you. Martha. I won't argue. She placed a trembling hand on his chest, right over his heart. God didn't bring you into our lives to be buried today. He breathed out shakily. Then pray he keeps me standing. She pressed her forehead to his for one brief, sacred second. I already am. Luke stepped away before he lost the will to walk out that door. He shut it behind him and faced the open land. The riders were coming. The gang arrives. Dust rose like a storm cloud along the ridge. 7 riders. Steel at the front. He reined in a few yards from the porch, his eyes cold and wild. Callahan, he shouted. Step aside. I came for the widow and her brats. You move and I let you live. Luke didn't move. You're not taking anyone from this ranch. Steele sneered, leaning forward in his saddle. You think you can stop me? You think you can stop all of us? Luke lifted his rifle. Try me. Steele laughed darkly. Boys, kill him. The first shots. Gunfire exploded across the valley. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Luke dove for cover behind a water trough, firing back with deadly precision. One outlaw fell. Another grabbed his arm, wounded. Inside the cabin, Martha flinched with every shot. Anna whimpered. Samuel whispered, Ma, he's gonna be okay, right? Martha closed her eyes. God's with him. Keep praying. Luke's bravery. Luke rolled from cover, firing again, one bullet striking a rider clean off his horse. Another man rushed toward the porch, shotgun raised. Luke sprinted through the yard, slamming into the man with full force, wresting the gun from his hands. The shotgun discharged into the sky as the outlaw fell. Luke didn't hesitate. He picked up the weapon and kept moving. He was outnumbered, outgunned. And still, he fought with the fury of a man protecting everything he loved. But he wasn't invincible. A bullet grazed his rib. Another hit his thigh. He stumbled, dropping to one knee. Steele laughed from his horse, raising his revolver. That's what happens, Callahan. You picked the wrong side. But when Steele fired, Luke dove behind the porch post, the bullet splintering wood inches from his head. Martha steps out. Inside, Martha heard Luke's shout of pain. I'm going out, she whispered, rising. No. Samuel grabbed her sleeve. Ma, Luke said to stay. Martha knelt, cupping Samuel's face. Luke is bleeding, Samuel. He stood for us, now we stand for him. Samuel stared, then nodded slowly. Martha rose, grabbed Luke's spare rifle and stepped outside. She took cover behind the porch beam just as another bullet whizzed past. Luke saw her and shouted, horrified, Martha, get back inside. No, she called back. You're not facing this alone. Steele spotted her. So that's the widow. Pretty thing. Shame she won't survive this. Martha steadied her shaking hands. God is my refuge, she whispered. She fired. The shot struck Steele's shoulder, sending him reeling backward in the saddle. Luke's eyes widened in shock and awe. Martha. Her breathing shook, the recoil bruised her shoulder, but she held firm. Steele makes his move. Get the woman? Steele roared. 2 riders charged toward the cabin. Luke forced himself up, firing with renewed fury. He dropped one rider instantly. The other leaped from his horse and rushed up the steps. Samuel appeared in the doorway with a cast-iron pan and swung it with everything he had. Clang. The outlaw toppled off the porch. Luke blinked. Samuel? Samuel panted, eyes wide. I wasn't letting him through. Luke couldn't help a strained laugh. You're your father's son. But Steele wasn't done. Bleeding, furious, he raised his revolver toward Martha. Luke saw it in slow motion, the aim, the finger tightening, Martha frozen. No! Luke roared. He lunged, shoving her to the ground as the gunshot cracked. Luke hit the dirt hard. The bullet tearing across his side. Martha screamed, Luke? The turn of the battle. Before Steele could fire again. Boom. A shotgun blast echoed through the valley. Steele spun in his saddle, hit in the arm. Sheriff Briggs and 6 armed townsmen thundered into the clearing, rifles raised, voices shouting. Drop your guns. The remaining gang members scattered, afraid now that the law had arrived. Steele tried to flee. But Briggs shot his horse's reins, stopping him cold. Steele fell to the ground, grabbed his revolver. Luke limped forward, gun raised despite the pain. Don't, Luke warned. Steele snarled, lifting his weapon. Luke fired. Steele crumpled into the dirt. The battle was over. Aftermath, grace and a new beginning. Martha rushed to Luke's side, tears pouring down her face. Luke, stay with me. He gritted his teeth, breath trembling. I'm not going anywhere. Samuel, Anna, and Eli huddled around him, Eli clutching Luke's hand with both of his tiny ones. Sheriff Briggs knelt. We'll get a doctor. Hold tight. Martha pressed her forehead to Luke's. Why would you risk your life like that? He looked into her eyes, weak but certain. Because you're worth protecting. All of you. She shook her head, crying. You're more than a protector, Luke. You're part of us now. Luke swallowed hard. Is that what you want? She nodded. It's what we want. Eli crawled into Luke's lap and whispered. Pa, don't leave us. Luke choked, emotion breaking inside him. I'm right here, son. Weeks later, healing and hope. Luke recovered slowly, the children tending to him with the devotion only love can fuel. Martha fed him broth, changed bandages, and prayed over him daily. The ranch grew peaceful again. Birds returned. Grass sprang up where bullets once tore the earth. One warm evening, Martha stepped onto the porch where Luke sat watching the sunset. She sat beside him. He took her hand. It fit perfectly. Martha, he murmured, I ain't a man of fancy words, but if you'd have me, I'd like to stay. Not just as a protector. Not just as a friend. She turned to him, eyes full of quiet joy. But as family? He nodded. She smiled, tears shining. Luke, we were waiting for you long before we knew your name. Anna peeked from behind the door. Samuel pretended not to watch. Eli climbed into Luke's lap. Luke wrapped an arm around Martha and whispered, Thank you, Lord, for second chances. And under that vast western sky, surrounded by the family he had fought to save, Luke Callahan finally found what he'd spent a lifetime searching for. A home, a purpose, and a love worth living and fighting for.